When you think of DC animated TV shows with great quality, memorability, and replayability, what comes to mind first? You could go all the way back to 2003, when the pristine masterpiece, also known as the original Teen Titans cartoon, released. Or you could go with one of the many great options of that time period, like the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, or the Batman cartoons like Batman Animated Series and Batman Beyond. Or you could go with a newer show like Young Justice, which in my opinion is the best one out of all of them, if you don't count season 3 and 4 of course. The point I'm trying to make is that there were so many great superhero cartoons to watch in the 2000s and 2010s, because all the shows I mentioned were just from DC, not even including Marvel shows like Wolverine and Ultimate Spider-Man. And there were also some great non-affiliated shows like Ben 10 and Stretch Armstrong. But as I was saying, there were so many superhero shows you could tell were made with passion and intent, which are two things that are severely lacking in superhero cartoons made in the late 2010s to this current decade. If you've watched any of the older shows, you know that it's hard not to notice how much soul and care the makers of the shows put into their work. And yet, sadly, almost all of the shows that were in their prime are now discontinued or canceled. Or even worse, they've been absolutely botched by the new modern writers who came in and desecrated everything about the show until it's unrecognizable. And they've changed everything from the format of the show to the nature of the characters in the show to where it's not even the original show anymore. And if you've experienced this, I'm sure you know how painful it is for the IP that you know and love to be gentrified and tossed in the garbage when it inevitably doesn't make a profit. But with all these old shows gone, that means there's a huge potential for some new shows to come and make an impact with the same level of writing and soul of the previous years. At least that's what you would expect if it wasn't 2025, the literal dark ages for entertainment. Unfortunately, superhero cartoons are not safe from that, which is why the new superhero shows and cartoons are just not good anymore. I mean, it's pretty clear that 99% of the superhero shows and cartoons now are just pure boy slop, where they create a product that is just barely good enough to where the masses will consume the crappy content willingly. These shows are either carried by their IP or reputation, are decent shows with heavy amounts of leftist propaganda and a lot of degeneracy, or just pure garbage that not even the general population could pretend to like for more than a week. I know I've been ranting, but my main point is that the superhero shows back then were way better than they are now. And in this video, I'm gonna detail exactly when I think these shows and cartoons started to go down the drain. I think the quality of the shows going to crap started in 2013 when the abomination of a show, also known as Teen Titans Go, released. This show was extremely popular when I was growing up, but I never understood the hype even at my young age, and now that I'm older it's even more obvious to me that this show is pure brain rot garbage. I know people love this show for the humor and jokes, but genuinely the jokes are so immature, especially compared to the regular Teen Titans, where the jokes were actually funny. Teen Titans Go had basically no real meaningful plot, and to make things worse, there were barely any action scenes that were meant to be taken seriously. The whole show is basically just comedic relief for kids under 10 years old only, because if you're an adult watching it, there's no way you're gonna be entertained. And that's another thing I could rant about for hours. The infantilization of kids shows has gotten so out of hand nowadays. Because before Teen Titans Go, for the most part, they used to make kids shows with real world lessons and morals that were cleverly embedded in the plot, so it didn't come off as purely educational. Also, they made the plot coherent and deep enough to where even grown adults could watch and be entertained as well, kinda like some animes now. But that's getting off track. To get back on topic, Teen Titans started the infantilization of superhero cartoons and also started the cringe and degenerate humor that plagues every show nowadays. But it was still not as common as it is now, so people didn't have a problem with it. I mean, it's not like people have a problem with it now, but a lot more people are starting to notice it. at least the consumers who are starting to think about what they're actually consuming now. So from 2013 to about late 2016, the slow but steady babyfication of cartoon superhero shows was starting to gradually become more and more prevalent. That is until 2017, which is what I like to call the breakout year of the babyfication of superhero cartoon shows. This is when major releases from huge franchises and well-known series officially start to fall off from a cliff in terms of quality. And to prove this to you, I'm going to give you two examples of shows from popular franchises that took a sharp decline, especially compared to their predecessors. The first show that perfectly fits this description is Marvel Spider-Man, the TV show, not the video game. A sharp decline for this show is kind of an exaggeration, since Marvel Spider-Man is not actually a bad show. It's just in comparison to Ultimate Spider-Man, it's just not as entertaining. The show premiered on August 19, 2017, following the successful run of Ultimate Spider-Man, which lasted about 5 years and 4 seasons, from 2012 to 2017. And if you haven't watched either of the shows, you're probably wondering what the difference is between the two of them. In Ultimate Spider-Man, the show has a more mature high school Peter Parker that's a little less nerdy than he usually is, and he has a crew with him that he does missions with normally, episode per episode. The heroes in the crew are his age, and the dynamic between Spider-Man and the heroes like Luke Cage, Nova, and Iron Fist are a vital part of what makes this show interesting. And they fight villains that are meant to be taken a lot more seriously, as opposed to Marvel's Spider-Man, where Peter Parker is a lot more nerdy and awkward, and in this universe he hangs out with Gwen Stacy and Miles Morales, along with Harry and later the Avengers. The villains in Marvel's Spider-Man are a lot more comical, and you can just tell by the way that they talk and act that they were meant to be comic relief mostly, and not really characters with in-depth backstories. Another way to differentiate the two is by their art style and tone. The Ultimate Spider-Man show has a more comic book animation style, and the tone of the show is slightly more mature. Marvel's Spider-Man, on the other hand, has more of a kid show animation style to it, and the tone of the show is a lot more lighthearted. In short, the difference between Ultimate Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man is indicative of the decline of cartoon superhero shows from 2017 all the way till the current day. Not because of the mere differences in style, but because of the drop in quality of plot and character likability. And also because Marvel Spider-Man contributed to the growing trend of making brain-rotted kiddie versions of previous series and franchises. The second show that aligns with this phenomenon is definitely Justice League Action. You're probably wondering what the hell is that show? I've never heard of it before, and you're perfectly valid for thinking that, since it's a pretty obscure show. And on top of being obscure, it's also not even good, so I can assure you that you did not miss anything by not seeing this. This show is pretty similar to Teen Titans Go in that they both took a totally different approach. They both decided to make the show more for little kids and less for all ages, which was a terrible decision. The show premiered after the animated TV show Justice League Gods and Monsters, which came out in 2015 and featured pretty drastic spin-offs, where there were alternate versions of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. The show only lasted for less than a year, but it still had an interesting plot with a unique twist to the traditional story. Justice League Action, on the other hand, is more of the same childish and cringeworthy writing that's in most of the superhero cartoons nowadays. And Justice League Action and Marvel Spider-Man were just the start, because from 2017 on it only gets worse and worse. The animated superhero shows of the current day roughly fall into these three categories. The first category is the show that's extremely childish and only for little kids and maybe some autistic adults. The second category is the show that has subtle or heavy liberal propaganda and a lot of sex scenes and jokes, all in the name of being quote-unquote mature, even though the actual storylines have a ton of issues and a lot of just stupid things happening in them. The third category is the show that is just totally boring and safe, to the point where it's not even worth watching or talking about. There's been so many bad animated superhero shows now that I'm very unsure that I'll ever see a good one that was made in the 2020s. Young Justice Season 3 and 4 were genuinely so bad, and it was such a disappointment to me. It hurt me to my core because the first 2 seasons were one of my favorite shows of all time. I'm definitely gonna make a devoted video for all the seasons of that show in the future. But anyways, the demoralizing part is that people are acting like these shows are great and acceptable and a good way to spend your time. And it's frustrating because that only makes it so that the companies don't actually have to make quality shows to have notoriety and to make a profit. Like Invincible, for example. I'm not gonna say the show is bad because it's not, but it's definitely not a masterpiece, and it doesn't come near shows like Young Justice or Teen Titans. And that's the problem though, people act like it's good even though it's not, which makes the standards for animated superhero shows even lower than they already were. Invincible has its own problems, and that show is supposed to be the holy grail of animated superhero shows of this decade. And then there's shows like Creature Commandos and My Adventures of Superman, which are both just pure garbage objectively. Not even the average watchers or normies care about either of those shows, and they just pretend to like it when it comes out, and then they forget about it a week or a month later. And that is the heart of the problem with all these modern animated shows. At the end of the day, they are all disposable. I mean, Invincible is notorious for having a lazy and lackluster animation art style, even with people who love the show. It just makes you wonder, will these modern shows stand the test of time? Will anyone remember or care about these shows in 15 to 20 years? The answer to all those questions is clearly not, which is a crystal clear sign that animated superhero shows are effectively dead. The animated superhero show industry is dead because companies are able to get away with lower quality entertainment because the general population eats it up anyway. The only hope there is for the original Teen Titans show to come back, but let's be honest, that's never happening. It's just pure cope at this point. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think the animated superhero show industry is dying? And when do you think it started to decline? Also, I want to know, what's your favorite animated superhero TV show? Drop it all in the comments. And while you're at it, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. But that's all I got for today. See you guys next time.